Welcome, friends. We've got, I'd probably request you for a minute or two and then we will start. Right, friends. I'm sure all of you are there, and thank you for joining in this particular session. The topic being how to use news media to develop test bank. But before we do that, we would probably also like to ask why should we use news media to develop a test bank? Probably that could be the first question. That is, to do anything, the why part has to be convincing enough. So, if any responses could be charted down in the chat mode, it will be great, and we can then kickstart our session right away. Then, before I start, I'd also like to deeply acknowledge that today are both past and present, and the peers around are there. That is, peers include all the friends who are in other schools and who have in some way influenced each other in terms of taking the game to another level. And in that sense, it does include a bit of competition as well, right? So these are the few things which I wanted, and I think if a few responses could be jotted down, it will be great on why should we use news media to develop a test bank. Why we should use news media to develop a test bank. Are there any responses out there? I'd be very happy to take them out and look at it. Otherwise, I think we can start. So wonderful. Mr. Mishra says to keep the students engaged. That's very, very correct, and that's highly important. Contemporariness leads to a lot of engagement, and very nice, Avinash. Thank you so much, Mr. Avinash. What he's saying is to kind of understand how theory is used in practice, to keep abreast with happenings, to provide for getting the comparison. Wonderful to see the chat messages to be updated and contemporary. Very nice. So I guess we've got some very nice. So what my job is not just to kind of take forward the webinar, also to summarize a few things which are being mentioned there. And so to start with, you would agree that why use news test banks when we say that we need to understand what are the assumptions, and I'm sure you will agree with these assumptions. Assumptions are concepts have practical real world implications and ramifications. You can't teach concepts in a silo. You can't teach concepts in a silo. Very nice, Professor Rajkumar, what you are saying. And yes, Bhupeshta, you're correct. Get updated the real-time management. So one is to have the concepts with real-world implications and appreciate the ramifications. Also, there is an implicit assumption that if you have a test bank with several puzzles and tests, students should be able to internalize the concepts well. Because if you're going to get tested repeatedly in one way or the other, using data which you actually observe in the newspapers or on the business channels or otherwise, you know that there are real world, these are essentially numbers from real world and they are corporates that are there. And so also, there is an assumption that if you include them in a test bank, you are applying pressure, which probably is good. That is, there is that threat that if you don't do well in a test, your grades would be relatively lower, your marks would be relatively lower. And in that sense, there is also this assumption that a good student needs to go through some amount of pressure cooker situations. And in that sense, we are also saying that look, you can't be great just by being goody goody out there. Once in a while, you need to get tested as well. And it also encourages the unprepared students, students who are not ready, who have not yet kind of touched the books, to look into the issue and understand why they are unable to answer these things. Either their conceptual clarity is not there, they have never touched the book, nor attended the classes attentively. They're being physically present but probably mentally absent, or they probably probably having some other crisis out there in their personal lives which is distracting them from their professional engagements out there. So to get them back into, to create interest, to get them back, I think some of these things do help. So okay, Tanmaida, noted your feedback, and maybe we'll use video to the extent feasible. Thank you, Tanmaida. Now, why use news media as a test bank? Why use news media as a test bank? Probably a contemporary story with a puzzle as a call for action. That is, the objective is when you use a news media clip, there is a contemporary story with a question, with a puzzle out there, and there is a need to there is something which is asking you, can you kind of call for action? Friends, am I audible or not audible? Professor Yuvraj is saying I'm not audible. If you can just jot that down, please. Is that the case with every one of you? Okay, thanks, Prakriti. So also makes them feel that the reading and attending classes makes sense. That is, a student will feel that okay, looks like whatever I'm reading in the textbook or attending in the classes has got sense in reality. So with these kind of things out there, when we know that there is news media which is having kind of which can be converted into a test bank, what are the benefits for a student? From look at it from a student's perspective, and of course implicitly the peers who probably will be able to make use of the same question paper, or peers wherein there is a forward of the students question, students kind of answers that are to others. So what we understand is that contemporary news media output creates real life chaos. That is, when you kind of read a news media, which is, let's say, yesterday's newspaper, it creates real life corporate chaos, in some sense, replicates what is happening inside the corporate, and only partial information is available to the outside world. It also enables a powerful way in which people learn is by the power of imaging. Those who probably have had a very good background of organizational behavior and such streams will agree that power of imaging is extremely, that is, one picture can convey 1,000 words. Those things do kind of happen, and it enables use of visual media to capture the power of imaging. And it also stimulates an engaged discussion by sharing the context. That is, when you are looking at a recent real life instance, your ability to connect with what's happening in business, environment, and things around you, whether political or geographical or social, they get captured implicitly by the student who is trying to respond to that. So those are the implicit benefits that are there for the students. When we look at the benefits that are there for the instructors, probably having a very creative narration in engaging is something which they need to be very, very aware of when they are trying to create a question paper or a test bank using the news media. That is, if you are trying to replicate something there which is available, your ability to create a engaging narration may be difficult. And also, you will agree that from an instructor's point of view, maybe benefits is a wrong word there, but from an instructor's point of view, are also looking at the question paper being scalable. In other words, if you're teaching 4 to 5 different subjects, maybe the scalability may not be very high during that particular year. But if you're using some sort of a topic which probably you do tend to use frequently, then scalability does can kind of is feasible out there. So what we are saying is an objective and engaging test without being dry. It is not boring. It gives the confidence, that is for the faculty. It gives the confidence to take the challenge to the classroom. The faculty feels far more empowered when he is taking the challenge to the classroom, when he is leaving the students to talk about it, to discuss about it after the exams, after the classroom. That is where these discussions, these talks in the evening addas among students will create a lot of retention among students. And it also enables excitement in the after exam. That is, in the after exams and discussions that are there, it does create an excitement of what could be the probable answer. And when you are creating a question paper, you should be able to tailor make it and use this news media test banks with different audiences. That's something which I think you need to be aware of. And when you are able to do something like this, you will agree that, friends, you will agree that your respect among peers also is relatively much more. Now, what are the how do you go about looking at a news media and preparing something? First and foremost thing, decide on a news media output which kind has all the 3 C's which I'm mentioning out there. What I mean to say is use a new news media wherein you are able to ensure that the concept which you decided you are able to deliver that one. Second, the news media that you are using has some contemporariness out there. You can't use a news media which is 10 years old or 20 years old. And third, it also generates an amount of, that is, when you are using news media, use news sources which are credible, and also there is a credibility which is built in. For example, if you are using a news media such as Financial Times or Business World, the credibility of what you are doing is a notch higher than some of the relatively, you can say, not so reputed news media sources or websites out there. For example, the discussions board of money control or economic times may not be a very high kind of use in the news media. What I would also like to say is provide, be very clear about the adequate assumptions and news media facts which that are there. When you are making use of a news media based test papers, there are a lot of assumptions which you would be making when you set the question paper. It is highly important that we need to provide the facts or assumptions that we seem to be having when we are creating a question paper. Because please understand, a student's way of looking and doing things need not be aligned to a faculty's way of looking and doing things is. And hence, this suggestion I think is highly important. And please understand that whenever you create a question paper using news media, unlike a case which is open-ended, wherein all responses are welcome. Try to have a news media-based test bank. Relatively speaking, close-ended, because puzzles need to have a certain response, and they need to have only one and only one response, which is relatively far better than the other choices that probably are available out there. So what we are also saying is, when you are making use of news media, try to kind of make the puzzle, that is the test which you are preparing, as close-ended as feasible. It should probably have one response which can be easily argued out and rationalized using the assumptions and the concepts which you are wanting to test it out. Now, use footnotes and endnotes. Always, whenever you are having a question paper using news media, please make exhaustive use of footnotes and endnotes to clarify terms for use by a non-attentive student. A student who is relatively not attentive, you would like to have much more understanding and make use of the footnotes and notes that are there. So, shall I move to the next slide? Dr. Kalai or Professor Tarun or Dr. Rajni, shall I move? Do you want me to move? Okay, thank you. Right. Now, the second suggestion which I am having is identify the ground rules at the test start to be addressed. For example, whatever is non-negotiable, please clearly mention at the start of the news media. What I mean to say here, Professor Vikas and Professor Tanu, is that we need to have some ground rules. For example, let me give you one example. Whenever I have a MCQ using news media, I clearly say, please tell the reason why you have answered. Without a reason, I will typically not evaluate a MCQ itself. I say, even if it means 2 to 3 words, please jot it down, because it forces the student to remember that particular concept and at least mention those 2 to 3 words which he thinks are highly relevant. So, for ensuring the student's assimilation and trust, always remember, whenever you are having a news media based test paper, the moment a test is over, send an email of a suggested answer, or try to arrange a classroom next day or day out as soon as feasible, wherein you take up that particular test paper and rationalize or reason out the responses of why a certain answer is more correct than the others, why a certain thing is more correct than others. Otherwise, what happens is, there is this particular thing among a certain bunch of students who probably have a sense of all knowingness. They think that the answers are not the answers are not very convincing enough. You see, it is very important to make the students understand why their underlying assumptions were wrong, why their concepts were probably relatively, there were one or two conceptual errors which probably made them answer it. The puzzle in the test bank should build on news media facts. That is, whenever you are giving a test using a news media, you should build on the puzzle and aid in the conceptual connect as well. These two things have to be there. Otherwise, they will always say, what was the need for a news media to be shared with the class? So, there are a few examples which are there. I will definitely share this PPT or request McGraw-Hill to share a PDF of this PPT with all of you. And Professor Rachna, thank you, and thank you, Professor Siddharth. But all I'm trying to say is that there are a few examples I'm giving of how newspapers have been used to set up question papers in the past. For example, I've set up question papers about 13 to 14 years back using Financial Times. I've set up using Business Standard and Economic Times newspapers multiple times. I'm sure the videos and URLs are all out there and you can easily download it. And I'm sure there are many more you might be having which you can share as well with me. I'll be very happy to acknowledge your contribution and then we'll take it further. The point is, let us have a very quick question to see if we are all connected. So I'm playing a small video. I'm playing a small video of just about 20-23 seconds, and try to apply that to a very simple concept of that is how that particular concept can be applied in a real life situation that is there. So where is the video? Okay, just give me a minute. So, right. Yeah. Please observe this video carefully. And so what we do is, it's a very small advertisement which I found in a newspaper, and it's essentially an advertised tender inquiry by a government institution asking for tender bids from some big guys, from various, you can say, contract parties. And they are having a few things such as you need to deposit 500 bucks, and please watch this video carefully, and I'm sure we can then take it further. So you'll observe that there is a earnest money involved and there is a tender cost. When you are applying for the tender, there is a tender cost that is involved. And it's a small video clip of a newspaper advertisement out there. I'm playing this again, showing that look, there are a few mobile toilets and mounted sanitary napkin disposable units which a government institution is asking, and they are asking for tender quotations related to that. Now normally a student will not be interested in watching such tender quotations in a newspaper, right? Assuming that you probably got a chance to look at that, assuming that you had a chance to look at that, uh, did you get a chance to look at that? Any one of you? Did you probably were you able to watch the video reasonably well? Were any one of you able to watch the video which I had just screen shared for you? Okay, wonderful, Professor Pratham, and wonderful, Professor Vikas. So I think let us have the questions related to that particular video. So try answering this particular puzzle. The article, that is the news media article titled Notice Inviting Tender, the tender cost and earnest money received by the Ministry of Home Affairs, that is the 500 bucks and 1 lakh some amount, will be treated as, there are two amounts, tender cost and earnest money, and we are saying how will Ministry of Home Affairs treat them? 500 is the cost of submitting the tender, and 1 lakh plus is like the advance amount, the fee you are paying to be considered for your application to be considered as eligible. 500 is the cost for buying the tender application, you can say so. So Professor Archana, as you can see, there are 5 choices out there, and you will agree that a student will be forced to think, if I were an accountant of this Ministry of Home Affairs organization, then using which principle, how should I categorize the amount of 500 and the 1 lakh plus amount which has been mentioned out there? So there are, you will agree that there are, of course, those kind of aspects that are there. Now, whenever there are, you can say, questions such as those, whenever there are questions such as those, you will agree that you would need to find out answers for the same. So for this particular question, normally speaking, whenever there are questions like this, the answer is E. It is none of the above, and there are reasons behind why it is none of the above, and you would probably also have to reason out why you have picked up whether it is A or B or C or D or E with a reasonable argument out there. So perhaps there are reasons why it is being mentioned as E. I'll of course share with you the reason behind it as well. And then, if you observe, this is from the perspective of the Ministry of Home Affairs. This is from the perspective of Ministry of Home Affairs. Next question will be automatically from the perspective of somebody who's bidding for it. Somebody who's bidding for it. So let me take that particular question out there, and I'm sure you are looking, that is from the bidder's perspective, from the one who is bidding. That is, if you were Larsen and Toubro and you were to do it on behalf of Larsen and Toubro, then how would you treat the tender cost, the 500 bucks out there, and the 1 lakh plus amount which you are paying as earnest money deposit to the front organization while bidding for it? So from a Larsen and Toubro's perspective, you will agree that the 500 would be a one-time cost. It is more like you are essentially trying to purchase an application, and it is kind of a miscellaneous general expense, or it also, yes, you can definitely consider it market expense, but you can, 500 is too small a amount if you consider, so you can look at that. Now, the 1 lakh plus amount which you paid as earnest money, you will agree it is like an advance given to someone for your bid to be considered. You kind of deposited that money. It is like you are paying some money in advance to be considered for a public offering which is there. And in that sense, it will be part, and you will agree that it is current. It is definitely non-current. It is definitely the money, the bid results should be out there within the next 1 year, next 12 months. And in that sense, friends, answer A probably would be relatively more eligible, because you see in answer C, the 1 lakh is being considered as business development expense. But in reality, it's not an expense. If your tender gets rejected, you will get your money back. Your 1 lakh plus is going to come back. So what I'm trying to say is miscellaneous general expenses and loans and advances are there. So whenever you create a question paper, always try to do a Reiki with either a past student or a teaching associate or someone who probably knows you well and whose conceptual clarity is not very, very high. So what happens is it helps in terms of ensuring that errors, if there are any, can be muted and can be better responded. Can I move? Thank you, Professor Archana, Professor Chintan, Professor Prachi. So what we do is we move to the next one out there. Now, if you observe this particular video, it is straight taken from my book. And what happens is you will agree that almost every organization tries to do some off-balance sheet activity. Every organization tries to either underreport their assets or overreport their liabilities depending on their objective function that probably they might be having. So we are saying, look here, there are on the right side a lot of type of industries that are there, such as energy, wherein there is subsidy, there are subsidy related considerations, there are insurance companies, there are technology companies, there is a banking, there is media and telecom, aerospace, retailing, capital goods, transport. And we are saying, look, we are providing two match the followings out there of potential off balance sheet exposure. Now, can you visualize the nature of the industry? Can you think of the nature of the industry and do a match the following for rest of the folks out there? Hmm? So, what we are trying to say is, for example, which type of industry will have a lot to do with lawsuits potentially much more than the others? Which type of industries will have much more to do with guarantees and bank guarantees compared to the rest? You will agree that when it comes to guarantees, it is going to be banking. When it comes to big guarantees, it is definitely going to be banking. So aspects such as those will ensure a far more real life connect. What we are trying to say is, in reality, whenever you go through a news media item, whenever you go through any article or anything of relevance, can we convert it into a engaging puzzle? And can we do it either MCQ, or can we do it either, let's say, match the following, or whatever it might be? Please ask the student. Please ask the student to write the rationale. Without rationale, chances of they being right are going to be, you will agree that many a times it probably they might have copied, or they may have seen some other way. Their rationale may not be correct. So it is very important to view these things in such a way that that a student is engaged. He also has a real life connect. He is able to see why in practice it is very important to have sound concepts. So those are a few things which were there. Now, what we are trying to say is, we went through two examples. One, a newspaper based video clip, and another, a very simple, straightforward, you can say, match the following or something like that, from a media report which was available and which was visible out there. Now, whenever you do this, whenever you do it, you will also agree that it is important. Where, how do I move to the next slide? uh, Prakriti, can you help me in moving to the next slide, please? I'm unable to do. Thank you. Thank you. Maybe I'll switch off the video. Yeah, I think that might just be helping. So, okay. Now, the point is, before floating the questions or test banks, yeah, Professor Archana, there will definitely be a difference of views out there. And it is very important to afterwards, if you are having a match the following like this, it is very important to share the relevant news media based sources or your own background for taking it further, to ensure that the buy-in of the students is very well. Because often what happens is, our own worldview of a certain industry may not be exactly synced with a student who probably has not seen much of the real life that you might be having. And in that sense, you are 100% correct. Now, before floating the questions, before floating the test bank, please ensure that you pilot the puzzle. That is, you try it out. You try out the puzzle. It could be just the next door uncle out there who probably is a commerce graduate if it is a finance related paper. But you please pilot the puzzle with a few past students, teaching associates, to ensure that the errors are completely ironed out. Often, as a student, you will feel very unhappy if the assumptions are not being given. As a student, you feel cheated when you have not got the marks you deserve. And in that sense, you need to also provide some clarifications. If needed, you might need to provide some hints in the bracket, just to ensure that a student understands what are the assumptions and what are the probable concepts you are targeting. Never leave. Whenever you are having a test bank, please try to not have open-ended things. When you keep things open-ended, then almost everyone will go in a unique direction, and you will agree that there will be no concrete closure out there. So check for clear description of a decision to be made. For example, whenever you are doing it, also what happens is when you do it, when you go for a second round checking and piloting, you can decide on the difficulty level of the question. You will agree that you can't have in a question paper all questions of easy level or all questions of a hard level. So check for the difficulty levels. You can kind of decide on the difficulty level each one has. You also will be able to know which learning objective is being answered with respect to which particular question out there. For example, you might be thinking that there's a learning objective being tested, but the way you have framed your question, the language which you have used, maybe that is not clear. You'll agree that in our passion, in our zeal to finish it quickly, we may not have written it properly. We may not have written the question properly. So these things are extremely important. Now, understand that whenever you are creating a test bank using news media, giving our assumptions is important, getting it pilot tested, final answer, difficulty level, the learning objectives that are there, and similar probably are there. That's a very good thumb rule you are mentioning 40, 30, 30. Professor Archana is talking about the difficulty levels that probably one needs to have. So check for clear description of a decision to be made. Whenever you have a question paper, your puzzle should have a clear description of a decision. For example, a news media with a concept to be tested. What is that particular concept you are trying to test it out? At the end, is your rationale trying to bring that particular concept forward or not? Put the students in the position of a decision maker. To the extent feasible, always try to say, if you were so and so, if you were Larsen and Toubro, or if you were accountant doing accounting on behalf of Ministry of Home Affairs. Have something on those lines. Then I think another thumb rule Professor Rakesh is mentioning. Then also, please understand that when you are doing a second round of checking, you will also get feedback on the level of analysis and the quality of the puzzle that is being used. And when you do second round of checking, and when you probably go through the question paper again, there is every chance that your question paper, while we are all doing what I call as research, that is read and search. I'm kind of trying to make a, you can say, have a joke out there, but with at least myself. But please understand that you would like to be much more original than someone else. You would like to have something which is your own statement, and in that sense, when you do a rechecking, when you go make it iterate a little further, the originality levels increase drastically. You probably will be getting a far better idea out there. Or alternatively, if 2 to 3 faculty members are teaching the same course, maybe one creates the question paper and the other one decides on how to polish it out and ensure that the whole game goes to another level. So those were a few things which probably I had in mind, and I had clearly thought that we'd be having a 60-minute seminar wherein we'll have 40 minutes for the presentation, 40 minutes, and looks like I probably am giving you a half a minute or 0 minutes of bonus out there. I'm done with my seminar of just about 10 to 12 slides that are there, and I'll be very happy to take up questions and take up things which might need to be answered. And I'm sure some of our colleagues might also actually have those things weaved in such a fashion that they are far better. So I'd be very happy to take up questions, and the floor is open. I'll not kind of speak for the next 2 minutes. The floor is open for you to jot down your questions. And from McGraw-Hill's side, Miss Prakriti and Miss Nurul will help us out in terms of deciding and putting it out for me, and I'll take it further from there. And I'm sure we can help each other using the chat mode as well. So look forward to your questions, friends, over the next 2 minutes. So I hope you are jotting down a few questions out there. Would be very happy to answer them, and I'm sure we can help each other out there in terms of becoming better faculty members. So I would like a few questions, just one. Okay, that's a wonderful point, Dr. Rachna. Prakriti, did you get any more questions, or shall I take this one? Yeah, one question which Dr. Rachna has rightly kind of asked is her question was, is it very important? Rachna madam's question was, is it very important to have close-ended questions only, as at times we really want to encourage the thinking and creative side? You're correct, but in a test paper, you would like to not have their creative side out there. First and foremost, see, of course, I think my answer is weaved into uh, the you can say the fact that we are talking of accounting and finance, and you would agree that it is better to have not too much of their creative side when it comes to test bank. If you want to have it open-ended question, then I think you might better call it as a case or a caselet, but it is difficult to call it as a test bank, because a test bank means there is an answer and there is probably a certain answer which has to use a certain news media clip and a certain concept or certain combination of analytical tools to answer it out. So, Dr. Rachna, let me put it this way, that if you are keeping it open-ended, it will be a good idea to call it as case or a caselet. But if you are keeping it close-ended, maybe it will be a great idea to call it as question and answer or test bank or something like that. I hope you agree with it. I do agree with you that maybe in a question paper which is probably having organizational behavior or similar kind of a soft skills being discussed or argued about, your point can make wonderful meaning and sense out there that maybe keeping things open-ended might generate better responses because it triggers the creative side and the past reflections as well of that particular student, which is very important in such courses, right? Now, next question is Professor Ramesh Dalal's. Sometimes news media becomes embarrassing source to defend the question, especially when there is some regulatory or policy say change as we are witnessing these days. Extremely, I think that's a very informative point what you are saying, Professor Ramesh. But you will also agree that in some sense you are giving a student a picture of the existing context. If you remember one of our slides, we clearly said that we need to have the business, social, local, political context. Where was it? Let me just share that with you. Yeah, I think it's there. You see, when you are having, Professor Ramesh, sir, if you are having a stimulated discussion, I agree. News media can be embarrassing because on one side we talk about probably let's say things like ease of doing business or something else, and on the other side you probably might be having a business or environment or social or organizational context, which is exactly opposite to what you probably are mentioning it out. So maybe you will also agree that in reality, not everything is in a straight line and a straight curve out there. There are jig-jag things which are there, and which one can always say that look, not everything is uniform in real world. Not everything has a pattern, and not everything can be kind of a response and an answer. A unique answer, same answer need not be thrown out every time. So that's one way of responding. I'm sure if others have other ways of kind of rationalizing what I'm saying, it'll be great if you can kind of jot it down. But Professor Ramesh, you have got a very valid point. News media can be embarrassing, but the point is it is also to say that policy flip-flops. Probably we can use the word policy flip-flops, and such things do happen in real world. Even it happens in corporates. You will actually see it happening in the B schools as well, inside the administration as well. So I guess we probably, as a faculty, it might be a very good idea for us to, for a fresh student who's just joined the you can say, who's just into the college, who has not had too much of, you can say, dirtying of hands with the industry. It may be a good idea to bring this out because I remember when we were fresh from engineering college and we were working in the steel plant, we used to think, why do they take decisions like that? Why can't the pipeline be designed this way? Why can't the organization take this way, etc., etc.? Our, you can say, assumptions of a real world or decision making is so very impractical that it becomes very difficult for us to understand how things are done in real life versus the practical. So maybe, Professor Ramesh, I think it might actually help if there is a embarrassing situations out there. Maybe you can probably, or we need to also add that caveat as part of our puzzle which we are creating, test bank we are creating. Now, Professor Ashish Gupta says, my question is, when we discuss with someone before putting them before student, does the confidentiality is not compromised or not? Professor Ashish, that's a very nice point. What you are saying. So what I typically do is I take a promise from the potential candidate who's my checkpoint out there, checklist out there. Let me kind of take you to that particular slide which he is mentioning. It's a wonderful question, Professor Ashish. What Ashish is saying is that look, when you are doing a second round of checking after creating the puzzle and you are sharing with one or two students, etc., don't you think confidentiality will get compromised. Valid point, but I think you will agree that there is a trade-off between going far, that is having a question paper with errors, vis-a-vis taking a psychological contract or taking a promise with someone who's relatively trustworthy, who's like our accountability partner, or who's like a good friend, being seated before them saying, can you respond to this? Normally speaking, when I run my question papers, I often try it out before someone saying, I'm actually seated before them, before my, you can say, ex-students, or before my, you can say, teaching associates, or whosoever it is, saying, try to please answer this. And only when they are able to point out that, look, we did not understand this, or you seem to have not made clarity about this, we tend to go ahead and refine it. Point is, you will agree that you will cut a very sorry figure if your question paper is having errors. And in that sense, Professor Ashish, I think I'm a little biased towards having a question paper with minimal errors, and hence I am suggesting a second round of checking. Professor Ishan Gaur says, sir, there are so many outcomes of a news, so which one to choose to make question out of it? Very nice to kind of put it this way. So I'm sharing, for example, Professor Ishan, I'm sharing, of course, about 3 to 4 question papers. If you see the test bank of this particular book, which has been released recently, Financial Accounting for Management, I think I'm having about 7 to 8 test booklets out there. One using using various kind of news media outputs that are there. It is very, very important that we clearly tell to the students upfront that all the questions as part of this test bank are from so and so newspaper or so and so media, whatever it is, and also clearly tell them that your responses are only going to be with respect to chapter so and so. That is, you need to have clearly what I call as non-negotiables. Non-negotiables should be mentioned upfront. Non-negotiables should be mentioned upfront, something which I think I mentioned it somewhere there in our slides. Identify the ground rules at the test start to be addressed. Example, what is non-negotiable? So maybe, Professor Ishan, I think one may be able to overcome that problem by mentioning things as non-negotiables. For example, if someone goes and writes something else, you'll have to say, look, our ground reality at before the start of the test for itself there. Professor Sirisha Nanduri says, sir, can we use a news clipping from Financial Times as a caselet in the final exam for MBA students? Professor Sirisha, it's a wonderful question. I think I've done it many times. I don't know about maybe if you are part of a university system, I think there are some conditionalities which you are referring to. But otherwise, I think I'm definitely confident. I have made use of it. Almost all my interim papers are using the latest news media or latest news clipping or something or the other. Because I think, implicitly speaking, I want to create a uncertainty in the minds of students. I have observed when you keep uncertain, when you tell them that, look, the question paper you are going to receive tomorrow or day after, even I don't know much about it, but it will be from some news media, or it will be having something which probably has some chaos and some contemporariness. Their preparation levels are relatively speaking higher. So, Professor Archana Lakhe says, can we encourage the concepts-based questions put in the frame of Bloom's taxonomy? Professor Archana, I think that's a very valuable point. I do agree that using Bloom's taxonomy will not only help you in connecting, that is, understanding which level of Bloom's taxonomy you are doing. In fact, it will also kind of help in the organization, in your institutes, let's say, accreditation and those kind of activities that are there. like AMBA accreditation, ASCB accreditation, and such things as well. So I think that's a very valid point. In fact, if you want, this is how probably I'm just sharing with you the way I create the responses for my. Just give me a minute and I'll show you how the responses are created in a newspaper based quiz that is there that I'm having. So maybe that will just give you an idea of how one can go about creating the solution as well. So if you observe Professor Archana, there is this newspaper based quiz, but if you observe for each question, I'm also saying which chapter I'm talking about, chapter 3, what is the difficulty level, is the difficulty low or high, and what is the answer. And wherever a question is having a very high level of, let's say, you can say there is a bit of confusion or something, then I'm also having some remarks which helps improving it. For example, if a certain question has a response which is different from what you probably have, then during the cross check, I ensure that that particular that is the suggested answer gets modified if the reasoning is clearly provided. For example, I'm saying for question 12, I'm saying ideal answer is B, but if someone writes E with this reasoning, maybe we can consider giving it. Something like this. So if you observe, this is how a question paper gets created. But once you create a test bank, you will agree that it becomes a lifelong asset, which probably you can use for the next 1 to 2 years if done well. And then, of course, there are a lot of those things which are there. For example, you can even have open-ended questions, as some of our friends were pointing out that for example I'm having a video that is there I'm having a debit credit entry as well, and things like these using a question paper that are there, right? So that's something which I wanted to point out. And are you finding it more challenging now to administer newspaper based questions since online classes are held? That's a Professor Chandrasekhar. That's a wonderful question we are pointing out. Um, when I'm having online classes, what do is I take a video of the newspaper itself and I share the URL of the newspaper video clip saying that you please watch this video and answer this question. So it is feasible. In fact, I've had a couple of quizzes using this way of doing it. That is, I ask someone out there, or I myself go ahead and videograph the question and then share the URL saying please download these URLs, and then I have the MCQ or whatever it is using Metal software and other softwares out there to ensure that there are responses which are there. So I think there are responses from Professor Pinky Joshi, Professor Sirisha, Professor Archana, Professor Narendranath, and Professor Archana. Yes, thank you. Multiple options also can be there. Yes, one can view. I will share the link. If not, I will share the PPT. I'm sure all of you are aware of, just in case you are unable to kind of get the right details, or just in case there is a delay, you can always use this my email ID I'm sharing, so you can always send it over to me, and I'll take it some time to respond. But normally I don't delete an email without responding. It's been my habit. So you can be assured you will get some response. May not be immediately, but you will get a response. And trust me, McGraw-Hill has been extremely proud whenever I've kind of given a request out there. So I'm also sharing Professor Amruta. Thank you so much. And Professor Rajvinder Kaur, thank you. And what is the future of financing and accounting? Professor Pratham argues. I guess future is bright as far as I understand it. I think Professor Pratham, yes, it is going to be more chaotic, more complicated, but trust me, it's going to be interesting. And the world of finance and financial services seems to be only growing by the day. Thank you, Professor Uma Ghosh, Professor Prachi, Professor Rachna, Professor Senthil, and Professor Chandrasekhar. So, friends, let me take this time to thank each one of you. Thank you so much. I'll take leave from you now and look forward to meeting each one of you, thanking you in person, and hoping to know more about you whenever we meet each other. Thank you. Inshallah, we hope to meet each other. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Prakriti, over to you.